What is your experience with this disease called bullying? How did this experience make you feel when it was happening? And also looking back through retrospection, how do you feel about it today?
Well, my first experience with bullying was probably the first year I went to school, first grade. I was, I guess what you call like a sensitive kid. Things really hurt me. I had a very abusive stepfather, and he was verbally abusive, and he was physically abusive, and he called me stupid all the time. So by the time I got to school, I was sort of sensitized to being beaten up verbally. And because of that, I was a real quiet child. I was like hiding, my head down, and don't look at anybody, don't meet their eyes, because if you meet their eyes, they're going to take you out, because that's what people do. Keep your head down. And I kind of, by being that way, I think people thought I was strange, and so I got marked and I got bullied. And you'll get people coming in your face, and all you're trying to do is get through the day and stay out of everybody's way, because if you stay out of everybody's way, if nobody notices you, nobody will hurt you. And they would come at you, and they would ask you like impossible questions, I don't know, at that time, calling somebody a faggot was the worst thing you could do, by the time I was 10 or 11, I realized that how incredibly hurtful that was, both to me, but also to people who were homosexual. At that early an age, I was sensitized to that. But that was the word they used, and they'd come up to you and they'd say, "Are you a faggot, faggot?" And if you said no, they would beat you up. And if you said yes, they would beat you up. Whatever you did, they were going to hit you. And now, there's still stuff left, even though I now can function more than I did as a younger man. As a younger man, I became completely agoraphobic, and I couldn't get out of the house, and I couldn't talk to people, look people in the eye. Even now, if I go outside, if I'm walking around, there's some part of my brain that's wondering if somebody's going to come at me, if somebody's going to take me down, if somebody's going to beat me up, if somebody's going to tear me apart, or if somebody's going to tear into me simply because I'm not like them. And that's with me forever, for the rest of my life. I don't think I'm ever going to get rid of it. Yeah.
Why are you interested in helping out with this project?
Because when I was younger, all I wanted was for some adult to notice, to care, and to reach out and do something about it. And to try to listen to me. All I wanted was for somebody to listen to me. And the people in school didn't want to know what was happening. And parents didn't want to know what was happening. They didn't want to know about it, and I felt alone. And I would like to be part of something that when that kid is bullied or that kid feels isolated, I want to be part of that hand that reaches out and says, "I am an adult authority figure, and I think what you feel and what you need and what you want is important, and I care, and I understand it because I've been there."
How has this illness, and I know you touched on it a little bit, how has this illness affected your life as a whole, dealing with friends, your family, work? How has it affected that?
Well, when I was going through this, and it was happening to me every day, all the time, from the time I was 5 or 6 years old up through, grade school, high school, everything. I got to the point when I was around probably 13 or 14 where I couldn't stop shaking. I was in a constant state of panic. I was trembling all the time. I was breathing heavy all the time. People talk about panic attacks. I was having them back to back. I had to do an enormous amount of work and go through an enormous amount of therapy to get to the point where simply talking to another person didn't send me into a panic. And there was a lot of time that I feel now that I missed things I could have done, things I wished I had done, because I was too scared. And it's only been recently, now that I'm in my 40s, I'm finally feeling like I'm not as scared, and like I can do these things that I wanted to do when I was 18, 19, 20, whatever. And so it meant I lost all that time. But I mean, this time is important, and it's good to be here now, and I'm going to make the most of now, but I lost all that time where I could have been gathering friends, I could have been doing things, I could have been accomplishing things that I wasn't able to even deal with until recently. So, I mean, that's had a serious long-term effect, and I will say that as much as I have friends now, and I can go to parties and be with people in social situations, I still feel isolated in every room that I'm in. I have a wife who loves me. We have the greatest relationship I have ever had in my entire life. She understands me more than anyone else in the world. But some part of me still feels completely and totally alone. And that's where I'm at. And that has a lot to do with being bullied and being called out for being different and being beaten up for being different. I still feel like that kid in the corner who put his head down in the schoolyard trying to not be noticed. You know?
Bullying has a wide spectrum. There are those who were the victims, those who were the bullies, those who were bystanders who tried to help, those who were bystanders who wanted to help but felt too weak to help. And then you had the bystander who just said, I see no evil, I hear no evil. Just with adults, teachers who just looked and then looked away. Sometimes in our lives, depending on circumstances, sometimes victims at times end up being bullies at certain parts of their life. They don't fully mean to, but they displace their anger on others. May it have been a pet, may it have been a girlfriend, where they know that they're not a yeller and screamer, but sometimes they yell and scream because they might have thought that other person was showing resemblances of that person who tormented them. Looking at that spectrum, do you feel that you only hit one part of it, or have you been a collective or different parts of it, different parts of your life because of the environmental factors?
I think probably a lot of different things, a lot of different aspects of it probably have affected me from different directions, certainly. You talk about the thing of, you said you saw something in somebody that reminded you of someone who bullied you or some situation you were in. It has been a long journey for me to get from the point where I didn't project onto other people presumptions that they were messing with me or screwing with me or putting me down or making me feel small on purpose. I would hear things differently, and I would argue, and I would get angry and frustrated and defensive. And that hurt a lot of the relationships I was in, because I was programmed to be always on guard. And I was programmed to be always listening for the next person who's trying to belittle you or destroy you. And the reality of it was that wasn't always going on. There are good people who are not trying to do that. They just happen to say a word or a phrase that you hear, and you're like, oh my God. Now they're treating me just the same way, and I would get upset, and I would get angry, or I'd get belligerent, or I'd walk away, ruin a relationship over that. So yeah, I mean, I think that, and there's been situations as a kid when I was bullied, or when somebody next to me was bullied, where I wanted to help, but I ran. I ran because I was afraid for my life, and then I beat myself up over and over again for being a coward and for not standing up, and for not doing what I wanted other people to do for me. And this is not exactly the question you asked, but I will say this is one very important thing to me. There was one kid in my life, one kid, 1 year in school, when I was in 5th grade, he stood up for me. Sorry. He stood up for me. And he stopped it. And he looked out for me for like almost the whole school year. He looked out for me. And I wouldn't call him a friend, you know, but he saw me and he was just, you know, he knew something in him. His parents taught him something. His parents taught him that if you see somebody being attacked, if you see somebody being victimized, and you can do something about it, it's your job to do something about it. And I'm sure he doesn't even remember who I am. But his nobility has always had a deep effect on my life and on me. Because he did stand up. He did. He was a kid and he stood up. You know? Most kids don't. Most kids are just trying to survive, and I understand that. I'll never forget that. I know where he is.